Hey everybody, I'm Joe. We're talking about the Marvel Multiverse game today with another character building tip. Here we go. So today's character building tip is have a God stat. That is a stat that does most of the offensive things that you want to achieve, that is mechanically higher than the other ability scores that you have. Remember, Marvel Multiverse has 6 ability scores, and it is not necessarily a good idea for them to be equivalent to each other. Let's walk through why this is true. The first reason that this is true is that no matter what, you're going to be leveling up in the game, and that means going up against enemies that are higher ranks. In order for an enemy to be of a significant challenge to players, we need that enemy to continually be of higher ranks than the players, usually 1 to 3 ranks higher depending on the size of the party. The other thing to remember is that damage auto-scales in Marvel Multiverse. This is an important point. As the enemies you face level up, they are going to, by default, be doing more damage. And in all likelihood, your narrator is going to be giving them more degrees of damage multiplication and perhaps even more degrees of damage reduction, simply to pose an adequate threat to the party. And that means that as you level up, you're going to be going up against enemies that do more damage to you and take less damage themselves. Since enemies are going to be doing progressively more damage in a scaled and predictable way, we know that we need to scale our hit points. Well, scaling hit points is simply a matter of putting more points into your resilience score, and so we can't dump resilience. Additionally, all of the really interesting powers in the game expend focus, and they expend more focus, frankly, the cooler that they are, which means you can't dump vigilance. Vigilance is going to feed your focus score, and so as a result, we cannot dump the 2 middle stats, resilience and vigilance. One is our hit points, one is our focus, and these are the 2 fuel tanks that we use in order to survive combat encounters. This leaves 4 stats, 2 physical, 2 mental, melee and agility in the physical, ego and logic in the mental. And if we can't dump these 2 important ones, resilience and vigilance, we need to think about what it is that's going to fuel our ability to do damage to our enemies. Here's where the game design is telling you to be asymmetrical in your point allotment. When you look at a power set, the power set is going to very specifically indicate which one of the attributes you are going to use for all of the powers, be they utility, problem solving, buffing, debuffing, or doing damage. The power set is going to focus on one ability score. For instance, the melee weapons power set very explicitly uses melee. Melee is the stat used for all combat done with weapons that are at reach. Meanwhile, the ranged weapon power set, formerly firearms, is going to utilize your agility score, which is used for all attacks that are at range, meaning that the entirety of the power set uses only one stat. This is true of the mental stats as well. Your energy control, your omniversal travel, your power control power set, all of these very explicitly use your ego stat. There are 2 power sets that use logic. They are telekinesis and telepathy. So when you go into a power set, you're probably going to take several powers and build 1 or 2 feat chains inside of the power set. And as a result, this one decision of the power set that's going to define your character is also defining which one of the 4 remaining stats is going to be most important. It's also important to note that Marvel gave us the SAD powers, the single attribute dependent powers. For the physical, you have brawling and evasion. These allow you to take either your melee or agility defense and use it for the other agility or melee defense. We have the exact same thing happening with the mental stats with wisdom and integrity, which are going to use one mental defense for the other. And these allow you to have one stat lower than the other in either the physical or mental category, and thus be able to have reasonable defenses while pumping one ability score higher than the others. We also know that at character creation, we are able to take a stat and dump it, go into a negative modifier territory. Now, you may not want to do that, and that's absolutely okay. But having that rule in place is informing you by Marvel that having an asymmetrical build is going to let you be more successful at the things you want to do than a symmetrical build, especially since you have to put more points into the middle two stats simply to have survivability. When you have your stats being all the same amount of ego as logic, for instance, that doesn't actually indicate how to play your character. But if I told you that I have a character with really high ego but low logic, you would have an idea of what that character is. If I told you I have a character that has very high logic but has low melee, you would have an idea of what that character is. And I think that it gives you not only a nice direction to play your character, but it tells you a series of types of action checks, non-combat, that you are going to focus on. The high logic character is going to be doing computer work and investigation. The character with the high ego score is going to be the face of the party. And so having an asymmetrical stat tells you, here's the areas where I'm going to be in the forefront of gameplay, and here are the areas where I'm going to let the other players at the table take their turn. It is a more exciting way for you to play your character, more great successes when you play your character, and a more balanced feel for the whole table. Not only that, but if you are bumping up one stat, not only with the ability score and continually keeping it capped, but also continuing to add damage multipliers, then you're going to be much more effective at taking down enemies that continue to have damage reduction. For instance, if you have a character in the energy control power set which utilizes your ego score, taking the discipline powers which add damage multiplication to only attacks made with ego is going to make your character much more successful at the power set that you have chosen. Damage multiplication does not come in a generic flavor, but damage reduction does. Think about that for a minute. The shield and the sturdy power sets simply give you flat damage reductions, but the discipline power only does damage multiplication for attacks made using ego. The powers as presented are telling you how to build your character. The way that I like to build a character is to take one stat and go into negative territory. You may not want to do that, I'm just telling you what works for me. I then take one stat and make it a 0. I don't add any points, but I don't take it anyway. These two tend to be one in the physical traits, one in the mental traits. So let's say that I am building an agility-based ranged combatant. What I'll probably do is dump my melee, bump the agility, and take either ego or logic and leave it at a 0. Then I take the sad powers to shore up those defenses. Doing this means that I only need to put ability points into 4 abilities: my agility, one of my mental stats, and resilience and vigilance. If you do that, you're able to get all 6 of your defenses to really high numbers by mid and late game. If you try to put a little bit into everything, you don't tend to do nearly as well, especially considering you get 5 ability points per rank, but there are 6 abilities for you to put points into. So that's my piece of advice today. Have a God stat and make sure that you are constantly moving it upwards and keeping it capped up, and making sure to add damage multiplication powers to really benefit that one stat. All right, YouTube's literally made out of buttons. I hope you press some of them, and I'll see you next time. All right, peace.